Marcus had lived in the house for nearly 6 years before he noticed the door. It wasn't something that had been hidden behind furniture or tucked away in a forgotten corner. It was right there in the hallway, positioned between the bathroom and the storage closet, as though it had always belonged. The strange part wasn't its location. It was the certainty that it hadn't been there before. He first saw it late one evening while walking toward the kitchen. At first, he passed it without thinking. His mind focused on something else entirely. But after a few steps, something about the hallway felt wrong, like a detail had shifted without warning. He stopped, slowly turning back, and that was when he noticed it properly. A plain wooden door, slightly darker than the others, with a handle that didn't quite match the rest of the house. Marcus frowned as he stared at it, trying to recall if it had always been there. The layout of the house was something he knew by heart. He had memorized every corner, every creak, every small imperfection that came with time. There was no reason for a door to suddenly appear where there had never been one before. He stepped closer, his movement slow and cautious, as if the door might react to him in some way. The air around it felt different, subtly colder, heavier, as though the space itself had changed. He reached out and placed his hand on the handle. It was colder than he expected. For a moment he hesitated, his grip tightening slightly as a strange sense of unease settled in his chest. Then, before he could think too much about it, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. Darkness greeted him, not the ordinary darkness of an unlit room. It was deeper, thicker, as though the space beyond the doorway absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Marcus leaned forward slightly, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, but there was nothing to focus on. There was nothing to focus on. No walls, no floor, no ceiling, just an endless stretch of black. A quiet unease crept through him, and without stepping inside, he pulled the door shut again. He stood there for a few seconds, staring at it, waiting for something to change, but nothing did. The hallway remained still and silent, just as it had always been. Eventually, he shook his head and walked away, convincing himself that it was just a part of the house he had somehow overlooked. But that explanation didn't sit well with him. The next morning, the door was gone. Marcus stopped in the hallway, staring at the empty space where it had been. The wall was smooth and unbroken, exactly as it should have been. There was no frame, no handle, no sign that anything had been there at all. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it. The thought lingered as the day passed, but by evening he had almost convinced himself that it had been nothing more than a trick of his mind. That was, until he saw it again. This time, it wasn't in the hallway. It was in his bedroom. Marcus froze in the doorway as he looked inside. The door stood against the far wall, exactly the same as before, its dark wood contrasting against the lighter paint around it. The handle caught the light faintly, just enough to make it impossible to ignore. A slow, uneasy feeling settled in his chest as he stepped inside. The door hadn't just appeared again. It had moved. He approached it carefully, his eyes fixed on every detail, searching for something that might explain what was happening. But the closer he got, the more certain he became that there was no logical explanation waiting for him. It was simply there, waiting. He reached for the handle again, his hesitation shorter this time, driven by a growing need to understand. As his fingers wrapped around the cold metal, he pulled the door open. The same darkness greeted him, but this time, something was different. There was a sound, faint at first, almost impossible to notice, but unmistakable once he focused on it. It wasn't random noise or distant movement. It was rhythmic, steady, like breathing. Marcus leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he tried to see into the darkness. The sound became clearer, more defined, and with it came a realization that made his chest tighten. The breathing wasn't coming from beyond the doorway. It was coming from just inside it. He stepped back immediately, his hand slipping from the handle as the door began to move on its own. Slowly, without any visible force, it started to close. Marcus watched, unable to look away, as the gap narrowed inch by inch. Just before it shut completely, something shifted within the darkness. A shape, tall, still, and barely visible, standing just beyond the threshold. The door clicked shut. Silence filled the room once again, but it didn't feel the same as before. It felt heavier, as though something had changed without his understanding. Marcus stood there for a moment, his thoughts racing, before he finally turned away and left the room. That night, he didn't sleep. Every small sound felt amplified, every shadow stretching longer than it should have. He kept glancing toward the corner of the room where the door had been, half expecting it to appear again. It didn't, not until morning. Marcus woke to the sound of something moving. It was soft, subtle, but enough to pull him from sleep instantly. He sat up, his eyes scanning the room, and that was when he saw it. The door was back, but this time it wasn't closed. It stood slightly open, just enough to reveal a thin line of darkness beyond it. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he stared at it. He knew he hadn't opened it. He knew it had been gone when he went to sleep, and yet there it was, as real as anything else in the room. The opening widened slowly, not by much, just enough to make the darkness behind it feel deeper, more present. Then came the voice, low and quiet, but clear enough to understand. It called his name. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. The voice came again, softer this time, almost patient. It wasn't asking him to come closer. It was telling him that he already had. A cold realization settled over him as he looked around the room. Everything felt the same, but something about it didn't sit right anymore. The walls, the furniture, even the air itself felt slightly off. He was seeing a version of his home that didn't fully belong to him. The door creaked open a little more. The darkness inside shifted, and then he understood. The door hadn't appeared in his house. His house had appeared around the door. Its mythic murmurs.